The music was soft, floating through the ballroom like a gentle memory. Strings and keys danced above the low hum of laughter, the clink of glasses, and the shuffle of expensive shoes on polished floors. The chandelier above caught the light just right, scattering gold flecks onto the faces of everyone who'd come to witness this perfect moment. My daughter looked radiant. Lee, my little girl, my once messy-haired, wild-hearted daughter, was standing in a white gown that shimmered with every step she took. Her hair was woven with tiny pearls, her smile effortless, camera-ready. She looked every bit the bride they all wanted her to be, every bit the dream she had always talked about, and I had helped build that dream. I sat at the family table, hands folded tightly in my lap. I hadn't been part of the wedding planning. That was between Lee and her mother, of course. No one had ever told me directly not to get involved. They just didn't tell me anything at all. Still, I showed up. I paid for the venue. I paid for the dress. I stood in the background of the rehearsal dinner. I smiled at the photos. I didn't protest when they listed my name fourth on the program after the mother, stepfather, and even the groom's uncle. Because that's what fathers do, right? The champagne was poured. A hush settled over the room. Lee stood, holding her glass, ready to speak. Her new husband, Ryan, gave her hand a gentle squeeze and sat down. She cleared her throat and smiled, eyes glistening. I just want to say thank you to everyone who made today so special. She began, her voice light. To Ryan for being my best friend and now my husband. To Mom for always being there when I needed advice, or when I didn't even know I needed it. Applause. To Dan, she said, nodding at her stepfather, for stepping in when I needed stability, guidance, a real male role model. More applause. I waited. My chest tightened. Surely I'd be next. And finally, she said, looking down at her glass, almost laughing, I used to dream back when I was little of what it would be like to have a different father. Laughter. Not the warm kind, not the kind that follows a joke. This laughter was awkward, restrained. Someone coughed. A fork dropped. I didn't understand what she had just said. I must have heard her wrong. Lee continued. I guess I always felt like something was missing. You know, when your parent doesn't always get you, doesn't really see you. My fingers were numb around the glass stem. Blood rushed to my ears. I felt like I was falling backward off a cliff. Except I was still sitting, still breathing, still present. I don't mean that in a cruel way, she added quickly. It's just Dan came into my life and showed me what a real father looks like. I'm just so grateful God gave me a second chance. The room didn't know what to do with itself. The photographer snapped a picture right at that moment, and the flash went off like a lightning strike. My ex-wife had the decency to glance at me, but only for a second, with a barely there shrug. Her husband, Dan, put an arm around Lee's shoulders and gave her the same smile I used to give her on her first day of school. I stood up quietly, slowly. I didn't knock over my chair. I didn't make a scene. I didn't even cry. I just left the ballroom, walked past the caterers, through the lobby, out into the warm September night where the stars were indifferent and the air smelled like lilacs and lies. I walked to my car, sat behind the wheel, and stared at the steering wheel for a long time. I raised that girl. Changed her diapers, slept in a hospital chair when she had pneumonia at 7, worked double shifts so she could have ballet lessons, held her when her first boyfriend broke her heart, drove through a snowstorm just to bring her a spare set of keys, took out a second mortgage so she could attend her dream college, and all this time she was dreaming of someone else being her father. All this time I was never enough. I didn't start the car, not yet. Instead, I reached into the glove box, pulled out a folded envelope. A gift. Inside was a letter and a check. My final wedding gift. The letter had taken me 2 days to write. The check was more than I could afford. I took a deep breath and tore it in half. Then I tore it again. And again, until it was just little scraps on the floorboard of the car. I wasn't angry, not yet, not in that moment. I was hollow, like someone had scooped the heart out of me and left nothing but the memory of who I used to be. She said she had dreamed of having a different father, so I left, and I didn't look back. That night, after leaving Lee's wedding, I didn't go home. I didn't answer my phone. I didn't check messages or emails or the thousands of photos I knew were already online. I just drove, no direction, no destination, just away. The farther the venue disappeared in my rearview mirror, the more I realized something quietly horrifying. She hadn't just embarrassed me. She had rewritten me, in front of friends, family, strangers. She deleted me from the story. I found an old motel on the edge of town. The kind where the neon signs buzz and the bed sheets smell faintly of bleach. It didn't matter. I laid there in the dark and replayed every moment I could remember. Every laugh, every birthday, every late night run to the pharmacy, every time she screamed at me as a teenager, but still curled up beside me when the nightmares came. She remembered none of it, or worse, she chose not to. Maybe the past wasn't as pretty as her new narrative. Maybe it didn't match the image she wanted to show off in her wedding photos. A struggling single dad with tired eyes and worn-out shoes. That wasn't the fairy tale. Dan was, of course. He wore suits that fit, had a clean, shaven face, and a charm that slid across a room like silk. He met her when she was 17, well past the hard parts. He bought her a car, took her to college visits, called her princess without ever having to fight for the throne, and her mother, she reappeared after all the damage was done, smiling like she'd never left. But I remembered it all, the nights she cried because her mom didn't show up. She was 5, sitting on the front steps in a yellow dress with daffodils on it. Her mother had promised ice cream and a movie. I told her not to get her hopes up, but she did anyway. I ended up taking her instead. We sat in the back of the theater, eating popcorn while she tried to hide her disappointment. She fell asleep with her head on my arm. When I carried her home, she murmured, "Thank you, Daddy. I like when it's just us." But she forgot that. The time I sold my guitar to pay for her summer camp. It was the last thing I owned that still made me feel like me. A battered Martin acoustic, handed down from my father. I used to play it when Lee was a baby, soft lullabies, just me and her in the living room. But she wanted to go to that camp. It was expensive, and I didn't want her to feel the lack. So I sold it to a collector in Atlanta, just days before the deadline. She came back from camp with a trophy for leadership, said it was the best summer of her life. She forgot that too. The day she told me I was embarrassing, she was 15, angry. Her mom had taken her shopping and told her she needed to elevate her standards. She came home and said I looked tired and poor. I had just come from my second shift, oil stains on my shirt, boots still muddy. I didn't say anything, I just nodded and went to shower, but that night I researched job training programs online. I started taking courses to change careers just to show her I could be better. She never mentioned it again. But I remember, you see, grief doesn't come just when someone dies. Sometimes grief is when someone you love grows into someone who doesn't love you back. That's what I was mourning now, not just Lee's words, but what they revealed, the truth I had ignored. She had been leaving me for years, little by little, a slow erasure, and I had let her because I thought love meant staying quiet. I thought love meant waiting your turn to be appreciated. I thought someday, when she matured, when the world softened her pride, when the pain of life taught her the value of loyalty, I thought she'd come back. Hug me, say, "I see it now, Dad. I see what you did for me." But that day never came. Instead, she looked right at me, on the biggest day of her life, and said she dreamed of someone else.